Yeah.
You know diapers.com? They're really good.
Are they?
Yeah, that's from here, from this guy.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Two guys, college guys, started that.
I just texted them.
Diapers.com. Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
Hmm? Why don't you attach it here, bro? Attach it here.
Right here?
Yeah. You can make this bigger, and you can attach it. Better? Attach it tight and then tighten it up here. Does it go?
Should I get a light? It's kind of
Yeah, you should probably get a light. This is for Instagram too. You could do Instagram as well at the same time. Okay guys, now I'm ready for real. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties, but we're good now. All right, today I want to cover with you guys what to say to clients, both buyers and sellers. So we're going to have different scenarios for both. It doesn't matter how much money we spend on advertising, how much time we spend prospecting if we don't know what to say, and not only what to say, but how to say it. Because when two different people can give the same exact pitch to two people, and if you say it differently, it's going to come across totally weird, totally different from each other. It could be polar opposites. I can call someone and ask them if I can visit their home and sound like I'm a professional. Someone else can call their home, say the same thing I said. It might sound like you're a weirdo and please don't ever come close to my house because of the way you said it, okay? So we have to practice. That's why I always say that role play is important, and every morning or every day that you guys get an opportunity, you always should be role playing with someone, with a loved one, with a family member. So today we're going to do some of that, but first I want to cover some of the important bullet points of each type of buyer. So buyer and seller, clients is what I'm trying to say. So first we have buyers, right? If we have a dialogue with a buyer, let's just say someone calls us on the phone or we're at an open house and a buyer comes up to us, how do we initiate a dialogue with them, right? How do we make sure that number one, we have a serious buyer on our hands, and number two, that we add value to the equation so they want to work with us, right? So getting started right away, we want to, if we meet with someone, let's just say Lauren is the client, she walks in and she says to me, yes, how much for this house? You know, it's a beautiful house. We're at an open house. And I'll let her know, well, this property is priced at $300,000, you know, and then she says, oh, okay. And then I would follow up by saying, is that more or less than what you were pre-qualified for? And if she says, oh, no, I've never been pre-qualified, then you know you're working with someone or you have someone in your hands who hasn't taken that step yet. So, you know, there's different questions you can ask and not pry too much. You don't want to come out and say to the person, 300, by the way, have you been pre-qualified? You know, or like, have you gone to a loan officer yet to get qualified? It kind of sounds like you're intruding a little bit the way you say things. So if you piggyback off of what they just said, it may come across a little bit smoother. So we can definitely role play this. But so first of all, questions that you want to ask a buyer when you first meet a buyer. Are you qualified? You know, that's one of the first things you want to ask them. But how do you ask them without offending them is another question too. When I first got into this business, and people would, my mentors would tell me, or the people that were in the business longer than me would tell me, the first thing you got to do with a client is find out if they're qualified, if not, get them qualified. And I always felt like it was a little uncomfortable to get people to tell you if they're qualified or to get them to get qualified. But it's all in the presentation. It's all in how you present the qualification process. So if she asked me how much for the house and I said 300, and then she kind of looks a little confused, I would ask her, is that more or less than what you were pre-qualified for? She might say, you know what, that's right in, you know, it's right in there with what I was qualified for. Cool. Did your loan officer tell you how much taxes you were qualified for? And what she would say, well, no, what you're showing is that you have a little more knowledge than most real estate agents. Because if somebody just said 300,000, most real estate agents just run crazy and they start just looking for houses under 300,000. But what if that loan officer qualified you for 300,000 with 6,000 in taxes? You know, and then you're sending houses with 12,000 in taxes or 8,000 in taxes. It's a waste of your time and it's a waste of their time. And then when you start making offers and you find out that the person doesn't qualify, your offers start to, you start to back out of offers, you start to build a bad name for yourself. So these are all the questions that you need to start asking buyers when you first meet them. So after we find out if they're qualified or if they're not qualified, we want to always offer them to get qualified in the event they're not. And in the event they're working with someone off the internet that they met from Texas or from California, we always want to make sure that they get a second opinion from someone that we trust. Because at the end of the day, you know, we are leaving our commission checks in the hands of that loan officer. And if that loan officer just pre-qualifies everyone and says, you're qualified, you're qualified, you're qualified, and we'll check the specifics later, you know, that's not a good pre-qualification. That's just like rolling the dice is really what it is, for lack of a better term. So we want to make sure, number one, we're getting the person qualified and getting them qualified with the right person. You know, a lot of times if I get someone who tells me, hey, I got pre-qualified with my bank, a Bank of America, to me, that's a huge red flag. Hector, I'll let you explain why it would be such a red flag since you're from the banking world.
Yeah.
Why would it be difficult to get a Bank of America mortgage closed? Not that all Bank of America loans or loan reps are bad, but why would they get different service if they went with the Bank of America or if they went with, let's just say, John Smith, the branch manager from ABC Mortgage? What experiences have you seen, and since you're from the banking world, how do they differ?
Well, the way that I would explain it is when you go to the bank, you get one product. So, and it's molded. Whatever the bank offers, that's what you're going to. If you fit into the qualifications that they have, then that's what it's going to be. When you go with a mortgage broker, that broker has several products that they can put you into based on what your qualifications are. So in other words, it's tailored to you versus you being tailored to the bank. So you walk into the bank, you get one product, and that's it. Again, you go into a mortgage broker, depending on your credit, depending on other circumstances that perhaps have happened in your life, that mortgage rep can now tailor the product to fit you.
Yeah.
So where we have one product, the mortgage rep can have
Many.
different lenders that they can work with.
Yeah. Another thing too that I've noticed with bigger institutions when they go to these banks is that you're treated as a number at some of these places because they have thousands upon thousands of applications. You understand? So what I like about mortgage reps is that, or mortgage brokers, is that, you know, they're only getting compensated as those deals close, and they're not usually taking on thousands of applications a month. So it makes the client feel like it's more a one-on-one. You know, and sometimes when the process in these big banks goes into play, the underwriter could be in Texas or California or somewhere else in another state, and the loan officer has no relationship with that underwriter whatsoever. But sometimes with these other mortgage companies, they have an ongoing relationship with the underwriting team. So they will give more leeway to someone who has been there for a long time, who has proven themselves, who knows that, you know, this person may not be a paper or 100% like by the book vanilla, but here are some compensating factors. And knowing that this came from a seasoned mortgage rep who knows what they're doing, I'll give them, you know, an approval based on, you know, I know that this person, you know, knows how to judge people. So, you know, you kind of get those things, but, you know, I hope anyone watching this doesn't, you know, work for a big bank and totally disagrees with me, because it may be different. Somebody with maybe 800 credit score, 20% down, walks into Bank of America, they could get 1/8% cheaper than maybe somewhere else, and maybe they feel like that's for them. But as far as us, we always want to make sure they get a second opinion from someone else, because it does take a long time as well with these bigger banks. It takes probably, I would say the process takes, I would say at least 2 weeks to 4 weeks longer on average with these bigger banks. I don't know, Hector, if you've seen that as well.
Yeah, so you know, the process in a bank kind of works, you know, if you're not the middleman,
Mm-hmm.
you know, serving as the advocate for your client,
Sure.
they can get lost.
Yeah.
The application can get lost. You can lose your deal, because everything that we do has a timeline,
Mm-hmm.
as agents, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're banking on a mortgage rep who keeps, you know, who doesn't send a complete package. And then there's a guide, you know, there's a list of what a complete package consists of. And remember, you're not their only client. They have thousands of clients. And
Can you
the
go on
person
Instagram
in
with
the
your
back office doesn't
Instagram
understand
Live?
who you are. All they're seeing is a piece of paper with your name, social, numbers, data, right? Where a local rep is actually dealing with you, has met with you, has sat down with you, has, built that relationship, going forward. And not only that, but if there's a blemish on your credit report, they're gonna ask you to explain that, versus the cookie cutter. You have a 660 credit score and they require 680,
Mhm.
disqualified.
Yeah.
You've had a bankruptcy before, disqualified.
Mhm.
So there's factors involved in that that banks shy away from due to, the Great Recession.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Danny leaves the camera over there. Okay, so since Danny's not in the room, I'm going to talk from here. So the other thing is that once we figured out if they're qualified, next step would be to ask them what their motivation is and how soon they need to be in another place. That's how we can determine whether we're dealing with a hot client, neutral client, or someone who's not ready to buy at all and they're just wasting your time and they just like to look at houses because they see it on HGTV and they think it's a cool thing to do. So let's go with the second thing would be motivation or timeline. How do we ask somebody politely without offending them when they're going to decide on a house, or if they're just kicking tires for lack of a better term? The way I see it is I ask them, how soon do you need to be into your next house? Very very simply, just like that. It's just simply put like that, cut right to the chase. And they will tell you, well, we need to be into our next house by the spring because of we want to move during this time frame because the kids are off from school, whatever the case may be, whatever the reason is, or maybe my lease is up, or whatever the situation may be. So that's what you need to find out next. If the person tells you, I'm in no rush, and if I find a house under $200,000 in this neighborhood, I'll buy it, and you know that neighborhood is nothing but $300,000 and up properties, you know not to put too much emphasis on that buyer because they're looking for something that's really not that commonplace, and they're in no rush whatsoever. If they tell you that they're waiting for next year to see what the market does to buy, I mean, like, these are questions you need to ask, because if you just start taking people around and showing them properties without having some kind of an idea when they're really ready to buy, then they might not be ready to buy at all just now. They might just be, comparing and see what's out there. It's happened to me before, and I didn't find out that they were just, kind of like doing some due diligence homework until after showing them a few houses. So, you have to ask these questions right in the beginning. So what I try to do is I try to spend some time with them, whether it's in the office or whether it's at our first appointment, not talking about the subject property at hand, but just talking about them and their needs. So make sure you do that. Spend at least 10, 15 minutes asking them about, what is it that they really need? Why is it that they're moving? How soon do they need to be in the house? Because things that motivate people are definitely, obviously pain. Are they experiencing pain where they are? Is there some type of deadline that they need to meet? So these are the things that you need to ask. And the sooner you can figure that out, the sooner you know whether you're working with a hot client or not. The worst thing agents do is that they just work with everyone that they come across. And just because they think that that's the right thing to do. Recently, I took one of my agents who was working with about 4 or 5 buyers, and I had her eliminate about 3 or 4 of them. I forget how many it was. I said, don't even work with these people anymore. Let them know nicely that you're putting them on a drip campaign, and when they see something that matches their criteria, then you'll take them out again. Because she was spending all her weekends showing houses to people who were not qualified. So since then, she focused on going after high-end listings, and today we have a listing appointment at 1 o'clock in Warren, and she's working on another person that's probably going to give her the listing. So that's $2 million in listings that she's probably going to get within the next few months. And that is attributed to not spinning her wheels with buyers that are not doing anything right now. So I feel like you need to always make sure that you're not wasting your time, because your time is valuable. You're not being paid by the hour as a real estate agent, so make sure that you work with only the right people. So that's my next topic when it comes to buyers. Now, how do we get the buyers to then make a decision? Hope I spelled that right, because I'm not a good speller of words. So how do we make them? How do you make someone make a decision? Does anyone have an answer for me? How can you have someone make a decision? What is the best way to have somebody make a decision?
Ask them, are you ready to make the offer?
Absolutely, ask them, right?
Yeah.
But you want to also make sure that they feel like they're making the decision on their own, right? That you didn't make the decision for them. So all you can do is kind of like lead up with questions, lead up with scenarios, paint the picture in their head and ask them the simple question: is this the right house for you? Can we present an offer? Can you see yourself living here? There's a lot of things that you can say to make that person make the decision, but you can't be scared to ask. Because if you're scared to ask, they will stay on that fence as long as they possibly can. Because the majority of people are procrastinators because they're scared. They're scared to make a decision because they think that it's not the perfect decision. Everyone is always looking for the perfect outcome in everything, and there is no perfect outcome. It's only in their mind whether it's perfect or not. So you kind of have to explain to them that, look, we've looked at 10 homes. This is by far the nicest home we've seen at the cheapest price we've seen, and I don't believe it'll last till next week. Is there anything stopping you from making an offer? Just kind of. What I never did when I was a real estate agent and I was selling homes is I never made someone make a decision on a house that I wouldn't have bought myself, or I didn't believe that that was a good home for them, because I knew it was just going to be bad. It was going to be a bad outcome. And what did they do? They always blame the agent afterwards, because you knew everything. You knew the house had this. You knew the house had that. If I feel it's a single mom who's moving in and the house needs a ton of work, I'm not going to say that's a good home. But if it's an investor or a handyman that's buying it, with his family, then I say, this is a good opportunity. You can walk into some equity. So you always have to know who you're selling to, who your audience is. So decision is one of the main things you need to learn how to have dialogue on too. So once we have our qualification, we find out who's really financially qualified. Then we find out who's emotionally qualified, right, by asking the right questions. And then after we start working with them, we have to figure out a way to have them make decisions. So these are the 3 dialogues we want to work on when it comes to buyers. So let's move over to sellers real quick, and we'll see what happens with sellers. What do we do with sellers? First thing you guys want to do. It's on the board already. You want to qualify them too. You're right? You want to qualify your sellers too, because you don't want to work with every seller. Some sellers are not worth your time. Some sellers are just going to put you through the ringer. And I have agents here who have short patience. And the way they do it is that they know, instead of like having, some of us are blessed with more patience than others, but some people, they have to do this, because if not, they'll drive themselves insane. You have to see if you're compatible with that person. If you're not compatible with that person, if the person is super, super overwhelming, you may want to A, pass on that buyer, or B, refer that buyer to someone who's more their type, who's more like their analytical type, or more their high-strung type, or more their loud type, whatever it is. If you feel it's not your client, that you can't get along with this person, they're going to make you miserable, then you want to refer that person out. So make sure you qualify your person correctly. First, by personality. Second of all, qualify to see if they can even sell, because some people can't even sell their properties. If the person says to you, I need to get $300,000 for my house, right? And a short sale is out of the question, because they'll lose their job if they can't do a short sale. And you do your numbers and you see that there's no way in hell they're going to get 300. They can only get 250 in like the perfect scenario, right? And it's not going to sell for 300. You don't want to take that house and list it for 319 and let it sit there for 6 months and then have them hate you afterwards because it didn't sell. You want to tell that person very kindly, your home is not worth 300,000. I would be doing you a disservice. You would hate me afterwards. So let's just do this. Let's not sell your house right now. Let's give it some time. Maybe the market will change. If you feel you need to list it, please go ahead and do so with another agent. But just promise me that if that listing expires and then one day you want to try again, you'll give me the opportunity, because right now, I'm telling you right now, I don't want to take your listing to just take it. We don't get paid to collect an inventory of properties that don't sell. So you have to make sure they can sell. A short sale is open to anyone in a distressed situation. And if they're in a distressed situation, that could be a way out for them. But if they're not in a distressed situation and they just don't want to sell for that less because they owe that much, then there's really nothing you could do for them. So make sure that you're telling them the truth. I know it's nice to take a listing and it feels good, but it feels even worse. It feels terrible when you can't do anything with that listing, and then you're getting the phone calls from the seller every few days. Why is no one showing my house? How come you're not doing an open house? Do you want to do an open house and sacrifice your Sunday on a house that you know is not going to sell? Exactly. It's a waste of your time. So make sure that you qualify your sellers. So that's number one. Qualify them. Number two, okay, what do we talk about after the property is qualified? What do we want to talk about when it comes to qualifying them? Motivation, right?
transition
Mhm.
into, you know,
Sure, motivation.
sexuality or- Yeah.
Exactly. So, a very, very similar situation with both people. This is not rocket science. Right.
It's like you said before, a lot of folks want to sell
Mm-hmm.
during that school transition.
Sure.
You know.
So the first conversation you can have with them is more financial. Second conversation you can have with them about motivation is more like, why are you selling? You know, is it a divorce? Is it you're retiring? Is it, you know, you need a bigger place because you just had twins? You know, whatever it is, and that's what you need to figure out. Now, if somebody comes to you and says, we're having twins or we're having kids, and they're in a, you know, 1-bedroom condo, and they're having 2 kids, you know that their motivation is high. Not only that, but they're up against the clock. Because nobody wants to move when you're 9 months pregnant, right? And for the ladies here, they know it's tough, you know, carrying a refrigerator when you're 9 months pregnant. So you want to make sure that these are the questions you ask, because you want to make sure you're working with the right people. There are scenarios where the person just says, look, if I don't sell it, I'll rent it, and I want $500,000. You know, the motivation is low. You know, they don't even live in the house; it's being rented. You know, someone else is there already. Like there's certain cases where you want to classify your sellers. You know, who's more motivated, who's less motivated.